Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, or VHS82 apostrophe, however you would like. This is episode 2 of my new series dealing with Space 1999. Episode 2 deals with Matter of Life and Death, directed by Charles Crichton, written by both Wallace and Byrne. First aired November 27th, 1975, right? And as we pick up with our residents of Moonbase Alpha, it is some time has passed by, and so apparently they have run into a few planets here and there, and none of them have worked out, obviously. And so in this episode, we deal with this new situation as it unfolds before them, and it is an interesting situation. There is a planet, and its computer, once making its evaluation, determines that this planet ought to be called Terra Nova, or New Earth, right? And so already they are making plans to exit Moonbase Alpha. It's a 3-phase plan, and it's like a domino effect. Once you hit the first domino, it's really hard to sort of just step in and just say, no, we're not going to do it. It's either pretty much you do it or you don't do it. Now, you can stop it. It just creates a lot of probably bureaucratic issues, even on a small little place like Moonbase Alpha. So everything seems great with this planet. It is a mirror image of all they are looking for. But there is a small issue here. They, as a scout, send out Eagle 1, and Eagle 1 on its way back, as it lands on Moonbase Alpha, they're greeted with their 2 pilots are unconscious, no explanation why, and there is a 3rd passenger who ought not to be on this ship. This passenger's name is Lee Russell, who happens to be the long-lost husband of Helena Russell, presumed dead about 5 years earlier of a mission around Jupiter. Terrible mishap, terrible, horrific accident, no explanations. He's just gone, and so he's been presumed dead. Well, now suddenly he's on Eagle 1, we'll find out, apparently having lived on Terra Nova for like 5 years. No explanation. There's not a lot of explanation for a lot of this as it unfolds, which is one of the reasons why I really dig this episode. And so, they're faced with this immediate issue of, well, what do we do? Our planned exodus has already been set into motion, yet we have this issue. We got to resolve it before we can just send people down. And so Commander John Koenig already has some issues to deal with, and Helena Russell, faced with having suddenly her dead husband right there before her, but there's something wrong with him, and they can't ascertain exactly what is wrong with him, but he seems to be not really in a gibberish, but he seems to be offering a warning of sorts. Colonizing this place is not a good idea, but he can't seem to articulate himself in a way that is understandable enough for anyone and everyone involved to make an appropriate decision. And so a lot of things will then start to happen that seemingly just don't make a whole lot of sense. And that's where some of the writing here does get sort of raked over the coals quite a bit. Even though Byrne, one of the writers, had admitted that while the script was hastily written, there was a reason for it. There were no scripts apparently post-breakaway. And so, they had to move pretty quick on this, and they were confronted with the issue that since they had approached the affiliates, since the major network said no to the show, and the affiliates were eating it up, the affiliates apparently had the ability of shuffling up the card deck and playing whatever episode they wanted. So it sort of mattered how they wrote these episodes. They couldn't just depend on writing in a specific order, knowing the order could be shuffled up. And so, well, is this an excuse for what's perceived to be bad writing? Maybe, maybe not. But it also, I think, all depends on how you approach this show. If you approach it from more of a nightmare logic, see, I'm a fan of Lucio Fulci. I love The Gates of Hell. I love City of the Living Dead. I think City of the Living Dead is, a masterpiece of terror horror, one of the greatest, if not the greatest horror movie ever made. That's just my opinion. Whether it's Phantasm, I just love nightmare logic as it unfolds, right? And so, if you approach this episode like that, well, then you sort of get it a different way. things, you know, naturally in use of dream logic, nightmare logic, don't always, you know, make perfect sense. Then again, Lovecraft said it is the power of the visual, the image over the mechanics of plot structure. It is what we see. It's the you know, that's what makes the Gates of Hell so awesome. And even though House by the Cemetery is a little bit more linear, the Beyond and City of the Living Dead, man, I just love how those things, man, it's just heavy visual, not so on the mechanics of plot structure. And so, you know, if you're a fan of these things, you just may really overlook what could be perceived as bad writing. And so, you know, they're faced with this quandary. What do we do? What do we do? And Koenig's sort of caught between the two. And so seemingly he's, you know, all for it one and then completely not for it, you know, and this kind of goes back and forth. Eventually, her husband will die. Well, supposedly he dies. And once he is, Koenig feels like they're free to just go ahead and push the Exodus forward and just go, because so far they have gotten, other than Lee Russell, they have gotten no warning signs that there's anything bad about this planet at all. What we're dealing with here in this story really is the issue of matter and antimatter. And when you introduce the two, obliteration happens. Now, it does not happen in the way that you think it ought to happen with this episode. But then again, would there even be an episode if you treated it as perfectly as it ought to be treated? So, you know, Lee Russell's character, his Lee Russell will explain towards the end of the episode to Helena a little bit more about Astro 7 and that mission to Jupiter. And apparently, basically what happens is there is a horrific accident. He can't really remember what happened, but to the best of his ability to piece things together, he is basically blown into smithereens, and his matter changes, and he attributes it to a type of radiation unknown. And so as he is basically sent fleeing into the other side of the universe, billions of miles out there, he suddenly shows up on Terra Nova. If this is a planet that is built on antimatter, how is it that he is able to survive for 5 years? Well, maybe because his matter has already gone through a change as a result of the radiation. Look, it's science fiction, man. You're supposed to have fun with this, man. And when you get into his conversation with Helena at the end, it does make for some really interesting thought perspectives in terms of what has been happening over the course of this episode. Has any of it really meant to make a whole lot of sense? Remember, the moon has just been flung out into the deep space as a result of a nuclear explosion. If you can accept that on face value, well then, you gotta accept everything. I mean, and so he'll basically explain to her that, you know, there is no such thing as death, that matter cannot die, it just takes on new form. And apparently Lee Russell has taken on new form and new resonance on this planet, Terra Nova. He consciously, perhaps, knowing that his wife of the past is approaching this planet, moves himself to be a warning beacon. When this doesn't seem to work, and the landing party that will come down to the planet, made up of Koenig and Helena and a few others, they, not realizing the gravity of this antimatter business, will be on this planet for too long, and then suddenly everything that goes perfect goes absolutely nightmarish. I mean, Eagle 1 blows up, Moonbase Alpha blows up from the distance, sending a shockwave. They're all dying, and Helena, towards the end of the episode, is the only one left, at least momentarily alive, and that is when Lee Russell will make his appearance once again, and he'll explain to her, in maybe better clarity, how it is that she ought to sort of make sense of all of this. And in the end, she's like, well, help me. And he offers, without much explanation, see what you want to see. And it's at that point where she will begin to revisualize Eagle 1, Koenig, the landing party, Moonbase Alpha from a distance. And whether things have gone back in time or reset back into place, how that has been, you know, yeah, it's not explained really well, But if, like I said, if you approach this from more of a Fulcian sort of nightmarish, I mean, look, I don't know what would have solved this and made this a better episode. Maybe having Helena seemingly wrapping up this conversation with her long dead husband at the end of the episode, and being suddenly back on Moonbase Alpha, waking up out of a nightmare, and suddenly, maybe there's one or two other things that have happened, and between that and her, Koenig then decides abandon the Exodus, which he will in the end, because once everything is revisualized, Koenig inexplicably will then make the decision, okay, call off the Exodus, we're not coming. Well, it doesn't really make sense, but it sort of does if it's approached via a nightmare logic type way, if you kind of get my drift. And so really how you approach this, if you approach this in a really linear way, you're going to sit back there and go, what the freaking crap happened with the writing in here? It's all sloppy, it's all over the place. But if you take into consideration what they were dealing with, and if you approach this from the way I'm telling you, the last time, which just a few hours ago, I watched this again, I dug it more than I did even the time before and the time before. I dig it when you don't have, when it's Lovecrafting in the sense of things don't make sense and are not to make sense, it makes it fun. And Richard Johnson in this episode as a guest appearance makes it for me, man, because this guy will go on to appear in Lucio Fulci's Zombie in '79, and that's how I know this guy, man, is Dr. Bernard. He is freaking awesome in that. I love his character in that movie. I love that movie. I think it's one of the best zombie movies ever. But in terms of having Helena wake up from a nightmare, maybe, I think about the end of Nightmare City by Lenzi, and how Hugo Stiglitz's character seemingly wakes up having, basically the entire movie was nothing more than a long, drawn-out nightmare. A lot of people think that's a cheat and that it just doesn't work for them, including Eli Roth, I think. But it works for me. I love it. And had they done that in this episode, it might have, people might have walked away with, it's a cheat, but at least there would have been some resolution they could have hung their hat on. It would have been something, whether they liked it or not. Here, it's just so over, it's almost kind of like, without realizing what you're committing to or not committing to, you're sort of left in the void. And so I think you could walk away from this episode thinking, is this where we're headed? And, the writing will sharpen up. Things will, become much more focused. And so, and here's the other thing, meta seemingly, going from episode 1 to 2 is seemingly lost. Perhaps if they would have, instead of Terra Nova, introduced meta, but allow that to be a warning beacon, not so different than we see in Alien, right? Or a lot of movies that will capitalize on that, on this sort of weird narrative of the planet that's sending out the warning beacon. Don't come anywhere near, but they don't realize it's a warning until it's too late. That would have been a great, great way of dealing with some of these inherent issues in this episode. So anyways, it is a great episode. I love the episode. I think it's too overly criticized, but it just depends on how you approach it. So I do. Anytime you get Richard Johnson into something, and it's a fun episode. Does everything make sense? No, it definitely does not. But it's fun. It's fun. And so I don't know if I really left anything out. As you can see up there, Black Sun is next. I'm not sure where this falls on the IMDb list, but in terms of production, it is the next one produced. And so that is the next one. That'll be episode 3, Black Sun. And so hang out for this ride as we delve deeper and deeper and deeper into this. And hopefully you're liking it. We always end these things off with Go Bills.